Good morning and welcome back to Plannercraft. I'm Natalie and today I'm going to be doing a little bit on questions and answers. So I popped a post up in the group yesterday with questions about common issues that you may be experiencing. So I've got a couple that I've already had from the group that I'm going to start with, but if you have any others, do feel free to pop them up, and if I can, I will go through them. So I am watching comments on Facebook, so unfortunately if you're watching on YouTube we cannot see your comments. So just so you know. And I'll wait for a few people to say hi. So don't be afraid to say hi. Let me know you're watching and I'll give you a shout out. So the program that I'm in first is Affinity Designer, and one of the questions that we had was about exporting to SVG and having issues with designs coming in the wrong size. Now there's 2 points at which this can go wrong, so I wanted to go through both of them. And morning Mum, and hi Jen. So I have a tiny little window that's giving me comments, so bear with. So when we're working on designs for our scan and cut, and I'm being very specific, it's the scan and cut that I'm covering in this one, we want to set it up a certain way. So you'll notice that instead of having a 12 by 12 map, I have my documents set to match my active area. Now even though I've set it to that active area, what you want to make sure is that you do not tick create artboard, because if anything that's still going to force it to resize. Morning Joyce. So you can see just here I've got it set at 295.9 and 297.9 millimeters. The next important thing to check is DPI. Now even though you can set DPI when you export, you are better off working in a document that is already set correctly. So if you put 96 in there, then you know you are going to be on the right direction. And good morning Jill. So hopefully you all got notifications, but you may have not. Morning Sally. And I don't think I've missed anybody else. I'm trying to keep an eye on. Hi Mare, don't worry. So as I know that you were struggling with exporting SVGs, I'll just very quickly go back over what I was saying. So I've set my document up to match the active area of my scan and cut. Okay. The DPI is 96, and that's kind of a magic number when it comes to the scan and cut. Now if you have another cutter like a Cricut or Silhouette, you may find that that DPI varies. So what I'm going to do is show you how you can check. So if we go create, and it's going to start a document. Okay. Now if you know that you are having problems, the simplest way to check is I'm going to create a square. I'm going to go down to transform, and I'm going to set it to 10 centimeters or 100 millimeters. That way when we're checking in our software that we've imported it into, we have a good basis to go against, and we'll be able to see roughly as a percentage guide how much we are out. Okay, so there's our 10 by 10 square. And at this point you don't have to worry about fill and stroke if you don't want to, but I am just going to put a solid stroke in. Just some software prefer you to have a solid stroke. I'm going to go to File, Export, and it's going to go to SVG. Now you can see here that I have a scan and cut preset set up. So I'm going to show you what that looks like in a minute. We've got our 96 DPI. Even though it says nothing will be rasterized. So what that actually means is if we apply a effect to a shape, so for instance a shadow, When we export to SVG, it's going to take that shadow and it's going to turn it into an image. Now that's all well and good for SVGs that are used on the internet as they were intended to be, but electronic cutters have kind of taken SVG under their wing and tried to manipulate it to how they want to work. So what we want to make sure is that nothing will be rasterized. So even if we do accidentally put an effect in, we want to make sure that it's not going to be rasterized. We'd rather that it ignored it altogether. So, next line, export text as curves for font independence. Now what that means is if you have put in text into a document and you've forgotten to do the magic convert to curves, rather than exporting that text still as text and causing an error, so long as that box is ticked, it's going to catch you so that it's going to convert that to curves. So if you haven't got this preset set up already, we're going to go to more. Okay, and at the moment you'll see something like, let's find one of the standard ones. So it's probably going to be on SVG for export. Okay. But what you want to do is then go through and do these settings. So we're going to have SVG as your file format. So even if you've clicked on one of the other ones, you can still go in and actually change this preset. Rasterize nothing. So again, that's saying that that shadow layer is not going to be rasterized. Downsample images, leave unticked. The use document resolution. Now, although we've set our document to 96, I do find sometimes if you use that, it comes in wrong. So you are better to use DPI and 96 in here. It's also important to have it set there if you're doing print and cut. Yeah, space for machines is always interesting in Classroom. Okay, so make sure that you put it in that section there rather than using the kind of cheat way of using the document resolution. Allow JPEG compression. So what that means is if there is something rasterizing here, which is not, it's going to actually compress it. Now obviously as we are rasterizing nothing, that makes no difference. So I've just left it as default, which is ticked. Next one, export text as curves. So this is another layer of safety net. So even if you've forgotten to convert curves on your text, even if you've forgotten to tick the box on this main panel, this one here will then apply and convert it to curves. So think of it as you're building in redundancy. So if you forget to do something and you forget to tick there, it's still going to have, it's got your back. Okay? Longer text spans we can ignore, so leave that unticked. Use relative coordinates, you want that ticked. So that means that when it's creating that path, it's going to create points relative to itself rather than relative to the page. Use hex colours we leave unticked because we're not using it for web. Okay, so if you were exporting an SVG that you want to use on a website, you'd have that ticked, but here where we're doing it for a cutter, you leave it unticked. Now flatten transforms you could leave ticked, because basically what that means is if you've used the corner rounder or if you've used the offset and you've forgotten to do bake appearance, flatten transforms should catch you back. Okay, so if you want to tick that one, you can. Now obviously when I set up my scan and cut setting, we didn't have the offset function, so I've left mine unticked. And it's good practice to get into to make sure you do that bake appearance anyway. Use tile patterns, again because we're not exporting it for web or for print and cut, then we don't have to use that one either, so we leave it unticked. The next really important one is set view box. Now, when you first have your normal SVG thing, that is going to be ticked. And what it means is each time it saves, it's going to save the outside bounding edge of that design as the view box. So the limitations of your design. Now, that is all well and good if your design is exactly your active area in terms of where it fits. But if that bounding edge starts to go over, you're going to cause it to resize in. And if it's under, you can find that it actually has the opposite effect. So you could end up with a design that is much bigger. So by unticking that box, you are going to make Canvas Desktop happier. Now, the reason I'm specific in that is that the online version can be the other way around, in that it would prefer you to have that ticked. Now, I know I'm always going to be using the desktop version. If you hover between the two, or if you're using the Affinity Designer iPad app and go into Canvas Online, then you may find that you are going to want that ticked. So that's why we do our 10cm box. We can export it both ticked and unticked and compare the two. Okay? Just for making sure that you have that complete picture. Okay, and finally, add line breaks is ticked as default, so you can leave that ticked. That is mainly there for somebody who is working on the programming of the SVG. But as you can kind of get into that through Inkscape, some people do actually prefer to leave that so that it's still editable in that sense. For most beginners though, you're never going to get that far, so don't worry about it. But when you start to kind of want to get really hands-on with the code, then it's a good idea to have that. And the subtitles are totally daft today. Okay. So, given that we've probably changed things on here, you'll notice that it's gone to custom at the top. So you'll see mine's still at scan and cut because I haven't changed anything. But you'll see it's gone to custom at the top. If you click on Manage Presets, you're going to get a little pop-up menu. And you should be able to create a preset. And that's the point where you can give it the name Scan and Cut. Now, if you're doing this for Cricut, then you would put Cricut and the DPI may change slightly. So with some cutters it's 90, others it's 96. There's very few that can handle the 300. Okay. And then we can close and export. So we're going to want to go to, let's start a new folder on Dropbox. Just takes a little space. So streaming Q&A, and we can call that resolution checker. Now, what you will want to do when your software updates, which mine has recently, you will want to check that those settings haven't kind of altered slightly. So you may find that your DPI might have tweaked, but it's always a good idea to just double check and make sure. So that completes how to sort out the sizing of SVGs. So how are you all doing? Have I lost you all yet? Okay. Next issue. Deb put up about designing in shortcuts a lot and how to create a cut line from multiple shapes. So I thought I would do a very quick demonstration on that one. So if I go to shortcuts a lot, you can see I've already been having a little play this morning. So first of all, I imported an image. Now if you import a transparent PNG, it's going to automatically create a print and cut layer for you, which is really easy. And as Deb put in a question, yeah, fair enough, that's nice and easy and we can all do that because it does it automatically for you. But what happens when you want to start layering up multiple objects? Yeah, Mary, if you're still stuck after, just let me know and I can always hop on and just help you out. So I've created here a little bit of a label, and you can see it's just down here in our layers palette. I've grouped the two together, thinking that I obviously want them to keep that same setup of alignment, and I've created a shadow layer. Okay, so that is how we do a cut line that's going to go around the outside of these without duplicating, welding, etc. So if I show you how to do that in a bit more slow-mo. So I'm going to create a couple of shapes. And I'm not really going to do anything particular. I just want you to see how reasonably simple this is to do. So I'm going to do it in different colours so you can see that I'm not welding anything. And let's drop in a circle too. And let's give that another colour. Okay, so there's our multiple shapes. And at this point, I just want to point something out. This is set to cut. So each of the shapes I've just drawn is set to cut. They're not grouped. I'm going to click and drag over the top so that I have them all selected. Okay. So you should see your 8 points around the outside of all your shapes. You're going to right click, go to Appearance, add Shadow Layer, and that's going to come up with a little pop-up. Now you can see that in our kind of our preview really over here, we've got this grey line that goes all the way around the outside, and that's actually a solid shape. So that's showing you how much of an offset we currently have. Now obviously if you're doing something like stickers, you might want to keep that border around the outside. But if you just want to literally cut out those shapes, you're going to grab your size and you're going to take it down to 0. Okay. Then when we go down to our little checkboxes here, you can see that we have print and cut outline. And at that point, if we tick that, okay, and we're going to go OK. So we can see that we've still got our 3 boxes. If we go to our style, it's already changed those to print and cut print. Okay, so the software has done that for you, so you don't have to worry about it. If we go down to our shadow layer, and I'm just going to bring that up so it's underneath. There we go. If we go to our shadow layer, we can see that it says print and cut, cut. So that means that it's all done all that kind of thinking for you with all those bits need to be set to print, that needs to go to cut. So it's a lot easier than doing the duplicate and weld when you've got things like possibly patterns and images in shapes like this. It's a bit kinder on your computer too. So that's how you do that one. Are there any other questions? Otherwise this could be a really short stream. Not that Ian will mind because he's on early today, but Yep, Deb, it was that easy, yeah. I knew it. I must admit, I did come on this morning and just double check, because I was like, I knew it could do it. It was just where to find it. So, yeah, it's just a right click and appearance, and off you go. So, are there any other software questions today? Unfortunately, I can't help you come and tidy your craft room, Louise. Maybe one day. Oh dear, Deb. I wish you'd just reached out with the file. Oh dear. No, there's always going to be an easy way of doing it. Just you might not necessarily see it, and the more you get wound up with it, the less likely you are to see it. Trust me, I know. I can be quite short-tempered at times. Okay, so registration marks. For scan and cut in Scale, you need to create your own registration marks. But if you're using the Silhouette, you can do it in app, and it will do it for you. So to create your own registration marks, you can do it a couple of ways. You can use squares and just literally drop them. You want to bear in mind when you're doing come on, I don't want a rounded corner one. You want to bear in mind when you're doing things like registration marks that you want to bring them in enough that they will actually print. So if I show you what I mean. Okay. So let's say this is my registration mark. I know my printable area is going to be kind of like this. So at the moment with where that's positioned, it would cut a part of it off, so that if I then send my data and try and line the two up, they're not going to work. So what you want to do is make sure that you bring this in enough so that we can actually make sure it's in our printable area. Even if that then means, okay, I need to move that over. And let's get these here. And I'm just going to group those so that I can move them easily. Like so, and then pop another little registration mark this side. That's going to be a bit closer. Let's bring that down. So when we're looking at our map, you can see that we've got our measurements along the top. There's our 210, so that's where the edge of our A4 would be. So you want to make sure that your next registration mark is going to be round about there. So to duplicate that nice and easily, if you press and hold Alt, click and drag, and then you can bring that across. Now this kind of registration mark that I'm showing you here, I like for when I'm doing things like vinyl, for instance, because it's nice and easy to actually layer up your colours of your vinyl that way. But if you're doing just print, you don't have to do anything that is that kind of ink swallowing. So if you just go to the pen tool, we can just do a little right angle. I'm going to give it a black stroke so it's a little bit stronger. And that's another thing, make sure that it's strong enough for you to pick it up on your scanner, but you don't want it so thick that you can't get an accurate line. Okay, and then we can always just duplicate that and rotate it round. If we press and hold Shift, you can see it's going to snap to angles so that we know it's round the right way. And you don't even have to have these matching up if you don't want to. And if you only want to put a registration mark so it's in line with your object, you can do that too, so that you still have some printable area that you can save from another project. So that's useful to know if you're working on things like labels where you only want to do like an A5 sheet, so you still have half a sheet for a different design. Okay, so any other questions? Rose, I was trying to do this earlier and I couldn't work out how. I'm going to presume that was the cutting around the outside. So yes, that's how we can get around it and do it that way. Now, if you are working with a scan and cut and shortcuts a lot, make sure you are exporting to FCM rather than SVG. And that just means that you are making sure that you are keeping the mat in the right place, so to speak, in proportion wise. I've noticed that there's been a few comments on the different groups recently about SVGs that have been exported from scale coming in wrong in Canvas. So the easiest way to do it is to export to FCM. What is the purpose of the registration marks? Okay, so registration marks serve two purposes. So the ones that I've just done here, the owls, are there so that you can line up printed items with a cut line on your scan and cut. So you print out your sheet with just your pretty elements and your registration marks. You export your FCM with just your cut lines and your registration marks. You send your FCM to your machine, you put your printout on the mat, you do a, let's get it right. You first of all import your FCM into your machine, then do a background scan, and the registration marks are there so that you can line up your design on your machine to where it is on the mat. Okay. So especially with something like this where it is literally going edge to edge, you're going to want to get that as accurate as possible. Now as you start to get more confident with print to cut, you can actually start to create things called bleeds, which is where we expand that printed area beyond the cut line so that it gives you a bit of leeway. Okay. But something like this where you've got this kind of meeting point here, you want to try and use this method, because otherwise when you start doing bleeds it gets a bit messy in the corners here. The square registration marks that I was showing, the purpose of those is to then use that with each colour of vinyl, so you could layer up that square in the same place for each colour when you're applying your transfer sheet. So that means that you can do a really complex design and you know it's going to be in the right place every time because of the squares. Then once you've applied all your layers to your transfer sheet, you're going to take off those squares at the top and then apply it onto your surface. So it tends to be more with adhesive vinyl than heat transfer, because obviously if you're using heat transfer you're then going to have to struggle to get those squares back off. But certainly with adhesive vinyl you'll find that nice and easy. And so to show you how to do the bleeds, this one's an interesting one. So usually when I'm doing really complex projects where I'm using bleeds, I will do it in Affinity just because. But I will show you how to do it on here. So given that we have our shadow layer, And let's see if we can do this without it affecting that, which is what we want really. So I'm just going to expand that outwards. And let's see what our shadow layer's done, whether it's reacted. Oh, there you go, that's what we want. So see, your shadow layer is moving and your patterned shape is going to extend beyond it. So we'll bring the shadow layer up in a minute so you can see it a bit better. So let's drag that back that way a bit. So if I bring that shadow layer up, 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 up. Okay, so you can see there's our cut line and we've got our printed area around the outside. Now this is where it's going to get interesting. Because of this top edge here, if I move this up so that we then have bleed, it's going to jump a bit, I don't want me to do that. Just want that one. Thank you. There we go. But if you look at this bit here, if this cut line's off, we're going to start to get this design encroaching in this space. So that's why I said with something like this, you're going to want to use the other method because of this space here. If you absolutely have to use bleed because you just don't think you can get it lined up, then what you actually want to do is almost take this shape back this way. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my pen tool and take this like so that we're angling it out. So don't worry about it filling with the pattern at the moment. We're going to come back and sort that. So I just want to tweak that just there. Okay. I'm going to lower that into the group like so. So there's my path. I'm going to select that and my base shape, and then I want to subtract those two. Okay. That way we're going to hinge that back there, and that will solve it. Dear, subtitles really are dreadful today. So, any other questions? So a typical bleed is about 3 to 5 millimeters outside your cut line. So I've kind of just done that by eye just to show you. But typically you would be looking at 3 to 5 mil. If you have a look on the link I put up yesterday for our new Creative Fabrica blog piece, I go in a lot more depth about bleed and how you can pattern match on a 3D object. So it really does break it down, and how to do guides and things like that if the program itself can't do them. And that's Creative Fabrica, not Paprika. Oh dear. If you were my cricket mat, where would you hide? In a cupboard. Or on top of some 12 by 12 boxes. Or 12 by 12 tub. Mine is in my scan and cut box. Could be wherever you put your spare blades. On the floor upside down. Back of the door. Because you got the hanging hook on the cricket mats, I think. From what I remember. What makes Affinity my favourite? Ease of use. The basic shapes, because there are so many that are really editable. I find it really versatile to just go in there and just quickly put a design together. When Illustrator takes over is anything to do with warping and whether that's text warping or image warping. That's really where Illustrator takes over and runs. Affinity is just as capable as Illustrator in terms of doing borders, patterns. You can make doilies and things like that really quickly and easily. Each piece of software has its own specialism. So like Shortcuts a lot is really good at having the cut, the draw, the print all set up, and then you can just export it to FCM. So you don't have to go, right, I'm going from that to canvas to that. Even with the scan and cut link on Illustrator, you still can't set a draw line as such. So that's where Shortcuts a lot will take over. Coral is really good at doing the technical side of things. So if you are doing lots of really complicated designs that you want to sell and you want to actually give people instructions, that's where Coral is really good, and you'll find that really useful. Inkscape is one of those programs, it really does give you back what you put into it. So even as somebody who's used design software for, 20 years now, Inkscape I do find isn't user friendly, but it does have its own unique ways of doing things. So if there's a particular thing that you want to do, like say for instance you're working on a vector illustration and you want to do like some kind of rough texture, thinking in particular the cover of the book, the little scribble on her cheek, that is Inkscape. So you can do that and it will just roughly fill that for you. If you want to do something that is quite computer intensive, so like a repeating sort of texture, Inkscape's quite good for that. There's lots of add-ons for Inkscape as well, so it's worth having a look and seeing what's out there in terms of even for embroidery machines. There's an add-on called Ink Stitch, which where you can use Inkscape to actually create sewing designs, and of course being based on Inkscape, it's all free. So the whole point of Inkscape and GIMP and programs like that is that they are open source. It means anybody can edit them, so it can mean that they're a bit buggy, just because you've got, potentially thousands of developers working on one program. But you'll find that there's what's known as the stable build, and then there's the beta build where they're putting in new features, but you may find that it's more likely to crash and things like that. And same with Affinity. Affinity has a beta program, so long as you've bought the full copy of the software, you can also download the beta version. So things like the contour tool that they brought out recently, that was in beta first, so that you could actually test it. So how it works now in the full version is actually different to when it first came out in beta, because they followed our feedback. You can get onto beta programs for Adobe. It's a little bit harder. They have a bit of a higher criteria for you. So you do have to apply to that rather than just it being there for you to use if you wish to. Coral, I haven't had any experience with their beta program, so I can't really give you feedback on that one. Oh right, you've lost a 12 by 24 mat, that's going some. Try on top of a wardrobe or under the bed. Oh, you've retired your silhouette. Might have to have a word with you, Jill. Procreate going 3D. Yeah, I have seen some chat about the new Procreate, and some users are not finding it working how they want it to at the moment. But it's one of those things where I'm sure they'll get it sorted when they get a lot of user feedback. So if you do ever have issues with any software, the best thing you can do is reach out to whoever makes that software, because you may find that they know it's an issue and know how to fix it. It may be an issue that they're fixing with an upcoming update, so that you know that you need to do that update to fix it, which is always a bit of hope when it's playing up, shall I say. Or they may not realise it's even a bug, and then they can get their fixed team onto it. So Affinity are very reachable through their Facebook. Adobe, I usually reach out to one of their evangelists through Twitter, so you can find them quite easily. So if you're not sure who Adobe need to speak to, you can always drop me a line and I can help you out there. Inkscape's a little bit more difficult because, as I said, it is open source, so you do really need to go on their support page and go through their forum and do it that way. So I'll look out for the update for Procreate, and Procreate is something I want to bring on stream so that we can kind of show you a little bit of work with it and then taking it through to the scan and cut. So I've been designing some fun things that would look fab foiled. So I'm waiting for that one. Any other questions before I call it a day? So we've done some long ones this week, so this is a nice short one to finish on. One of the annoying things about Scale 5 is it doesn't tell you if you're overwriting an existing file that has the same name. Yeah, and you can also find that a bit with Canvas Online as well. Okay, Linda, we'll see you Monday afternoon. Hopefully the first member project post will be out either over the weekend or on Monday, so do keep an eye out for that one. You should get it to your inbox, and that way you can just go from there. So I'm working on that this afternoon. Who would like me to start doing a 2 PM question and answer session as well? So not necessarily a live stream, but certainly a text question and answer in the Facebook group. You're welcome there. So we are here to help. So if you do find that you're struggling with something that is misbehaving, you can always drop it to us on a private message. If it's an SVG file, because Facebook doesn't like them, then there are other ways that we can get those to us, either via email. If it's big file, we can go by retransfer, or we do also have the Discord server. So I'm going to pop an invite back up in the group, because it's been a while since I've popped one up there, so that you can all rejoin the Discord group if you haven't already. So that's where we tend to put our SVG files if we put them up free. And it's also a good way of reaching out and having a chat if you are struggling. So with that, I'm going to call it a day, and we will see you Monday. Take care for now, and bye.